Alright, now is the time to put everything we learned together and create something beautiful. If you've done the Web Applications Fundamentals course, you would have seen at the end of the course a target virtual machine that I've created for you. I hope by now you've completed this course and you managed to hack that virtual machine. Because right now I'm going to show you how I created and I set up this machine for you, purely using commands and tools that we learned throughout this course. Nothing too fancy, it's all things that we went through and we covered in this course. So now you're going to be learning how to create a fully functioning server that is designed specifically to be vulnerable for certain types of attacks. If you haven't done the Web Application Fundamentals course yet, I'm going to do my best not to spoil it for you. So there are certain things that I'm going to cover up a little bit, or maybe I'm going to skip, so that you can go back to the Web Applications course at any time and try to hack that machine for yourself. I don't want to spoil that for you. I don't want to ruin the fun for you. Having said that, you are going to still see the full process that I used from A to Z, all the commands, all the configurations, everything in this video. So let's get started. I used a minimal Ubuntu version. If you don't know Ubuntu, that's another flavor of Linux like Debian and so on. I've provided the link for you to download. Usually that version of Ubuntu is around 50 megabytes. That's it. And then we're going to take that version and start building up on it and adding our own services and server functionality so that later on we can hack it. I'm logged in now into my VM where I've already set up Ubuntu. Setting up Ubuntu is pretty straightforward, so I'm going to skip over that section. If you still have questions about the setup, please let me know, but I don't want to bore you through the details of those because I'm assuming you already know how to do that by now. We've set up Kali a couple times, we've set up Metasploitable, we've set up a couple other targets. So assuming that the setup phase is finished and you're logged in already, the first thing I want to do, so I don't have to keep switching between virtual machines, is I want to log in remotely into my Ubuntu server using PuTTY through SSH, which makes it pretty convenient for me to work. So as we've learned, I'm going to try and start the SSH service. I do get an error though that tells me the service has failed because it's not found. Remember, this is a minimal version of Ubuntu, so there's a lot of things that are not already pre-provided on it. So I'm simply going to download and install the SSH server by using the apt get command that we saw earlier. And I'm going to type apt get install SSH. I'll hit the yes button and let the installation continue. I'll clear the screen up once I'm done. And again, remember we needed to change the SSH configuration to allow us to log in remotely as root. And we did that using the nano command. So I'll go nano/etc/ssh/sshd config. And using the Ctrl W, I'm going to look for the keyword permit. Once I find it, next to the permit root login, I'm going to clear the prohibit password and say yes. I'll save it, Ctrl X, and then I'm going to say service SSH restart to restart the SSH service. Now I grab my PuTTY and I'm able to log in remotely into my Ubuntu server using the password that I've set up previously. And here we go. Now I am on my Windows machine and I can freely work on my Ubuntu VM without having to switch between the VM and the Windows and the Windows and the VM and so on. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to update my software. So I'm going to go with apt get update. That's the update command if you remember. That'll take some time. I'm just speeding the videos up so I don't keep you guys waiting. Once that's done, I'll clear my screen and I'll proceed. Now, I am going to be installing a software later on that we're going to try and hack. Obviously, I did a little bit of reading and a little bit of research on how to set things up. You wouldn't know all these things from the top of your head. When you're setting up a new software or when you're configuring a new service, you're not supposed to or expected to know things from the top of your head, especially if you're a beginner to Linux. So it's completely normal and natural that you go and do your research and read up a little bit about it. So I did actually have to read up about this software that we're going to be installing. And going through the instructions, I came to know that I need to install a number of packages. The ones that you see on the screen now. I need to install a database server called the MySQL server. I also need to install a client. I need to install the Apache 2, which we've seen before. This is the web server, and the phpMyAdmin. phpMyAdmin is a way to control your database. Don't worry, we're not going to be using all of that. We just need those for our software to run correctly. And the last thing on my list is the P7zip full. This is very similar to the Windows extraction tool. If you have a zipped file or a compressed file, this is a tool to uncompress or extract the file. So you might have noticed that I put all the packages that I need to install on one line. We haven't seen this before. What we've seen earlier is you do the apt-get install and the name of the package that I want to install, one package. However, notice here that you can actually install more than one package in one go. So I'll let that continue, and notice that I am going now to be downloading about 300 megs. So this is going to take some time. Please be patient. I'll speed up the video a little bit. And throughout the installation, you will see some screens pop up that ask you to add certain parameters for your configuration. So for example, when we're installing the database server, we need an administrative account to be able to control that server. So here we're being asked to put a password for the root user. You just put whatever password you want. I'm just going with root and I'm repeating it. And now we want to configure another service, the phpMyAdmin. For now, I'm going to choose the Apache 2 web server because we have seen this before and we've worked with it before, so we're comfortable with it. I'll let the installation continue and finish. And then the rest, I'll leave everything as the default. I'll put another password for the MySQL. I'm just going with root again. And we're done. Now please keep in mind that I am actually speeding up the video a little bit so I don't keep you guys waiting. So don't worry if your process looks like it's taking longer than mine. Now that we've done preparing the environment and installing all the packages that I need for my target software, now is the time to download the target software. I'm going to be providing you with the link to download it. But to do that, I am using the wget command that we saw earlier. Because this is a minimal Ubuntu, and it doesn't have any graphical user interface, it doesn't have a graphical browser that I can open and put a URL in, I am forced to use the command line. And so I'm using the wget command that we saw before. So I do wget, I put the URL to download, and then -O. The capital O is to specify the output of the name of the file that I'm downloading. In other words, what do I want the downloaded file to be saved as? And I'm just naming it tiki.7z. The reason I'm giving it the extension of .7z is because this is the extension that it's being downloaded with. If you look right before the -O, you'll see the original name of the file that's being downloaded. That's tiki-15.1.7z. So it is being downloaded with that format, with that extension. I want to keep that. I want to maintain that format. So I name it tiki.7z and I continue the download. I'll see a message saying that it's connecting. Again, I'm speeding up the video a little bit so we don't have to keep waiting. Now, while it downloads, I'm opening a web browser on my Windows machine. And I'm trying to connect from my Windows to the web server on the Ubuntu machine. So in my web browser on my Windows machine, I am putting the IP address of Ubuntu. In my case, it's 192.168.88.135, and I can see the default Apache servers page. So I verify that my web server is actually running because I'm going to need that for later on. Now that the download is done, I want to extract this file. However, assuming that I don't know what to do with this extension, I revert back to the commands that we learned earlier during the course. And I use the file command. I say file tiki.7z. Please tell me what kind of file this is. And this goes back to me and says this is a 7-zip archive data file. Perfect, so now I know where to begin. Remember the second command we used after that? It was the apropos, so I'm going to do apropos 7-zip. Please tell me if I have a 7-zip file what tool or what command can I use with it? And Linux tells me you can use the p7-zip. Perfect. Remember, we already installed that when we did the apt-get install and a number of different packages. That was the last one we installed. Now again, this is a new tool to me. I don't know how to use it. So what do? I call for help. I do p7-zip -h. Looking at the help output, I can see that the -d option allows me to decompress a file. And the -k allows me to keep the original file. So when I decompress a file, I don't want the tool to delete the original file and just keep the uncompressed one. I want the tool to keep the original one and compress it at the same time. Just in case I mess something up, I'm going to keep it. So I'm going to use the -d, -k options and the name of the file. That'll take a few seconds to finish. And I get a message saying everything is okay. Now if I do ls, I'll see that I have a new directory created. Perfect. Let me clear my screen up. Now, here's what I want to do. Remember what I told you about the web server before, where the home page is stored and where if I want to change the home page, what files do I need to change? If you remember, I told you these files are stored under the /var/www/html. So now I want to move this directory to that destination, and to do that, I'm going to use a command that by now we should be familiar with, the mv command. I'm going to do mv, the name of the directory that I want to move, to the destination that I want it to move to. And in the destination, I'm going to change the name of the directory to just tiki. And then I'm going to go to that directory using the cd command. Perfect. Now let me list the contents of this directory. Alright, everything has moved perfectly. Now, again, I did have to do some reading and some research to figure out what is the next step. Again, I don't expect you to know that by heart or from the top of your head. This is a new software that we are installing, so you will need to spend some time learning a little bit about it. And with that, I learned that I need to run a small script in that directory. The script is called setup.sh. sh stands for a shell script, which is basically a text file with a number of shell commands or a number of commands grouped together so that I don't have to type them one by one. I could just run that small program and will issue all these commands to me one after the other, setting up the environment on my behalf. To run a shell script, I use the sh command. We haven't seen that before. But worry not, there's a very easy way to remember it. Whenever you see a file that ends with .sh, the command to run that file is sh. It's as easy and simple as that. So I'm going to type sh and the name of the file that I want to run, setup.sh. And now that it's running, I'm just going to leave everything as default. I'm gonna just hit enter, 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 enter until it finishes the setup. Everything is just left as it is, default configuration. Now, let me go and verify that my installation is successful. Remember under what directory we set things up? It was under the tiki directory. So I'm gonna go verify that, and voila. So again, I'm accessing this using a web browser on my Windows, but I am putting the IP address of the Ubuntu that I've been working on. Using the graphical interface now, I can easily continue the setup by clicking on the continue and continue. I am needed here to put a database name. I'll just name it Tiki. Database user and the password are the same that we put during the setup. Mine, if I remember correctly, were root and root. And I'll hit the continue button. Then I'll do the installation. And I get a message that says installation complete. Perfect. Now, I have one last thing left to do. In the Web Application Fundamentals course, your objective is to hack the target and deface the home page. In other words, that web page that we saw, the default Apache web page, you should be able to deface it and change it and leave a message that you were there. What I did though is that I changed that slightly to leave some hints for you just in case you got stuck. And here's how I did that. If you remember what I told you, The main page, the home page that you see, is the index.html, and this is usually under the var/www/html. I'm just going to create a copy of it using the mv command. Remember what we said about Linux? To rename a file, there is no rename command, we just use the mv. So we move it into another file with a different name. So I'm just gonna call it index.html.backup, and I'm going to create another one, a blank file called index.html using the nano command. Now here I'm using very basic HTML. If you're not familiar with that, don't worry. Whatever you write here will show up as text on your web page. If you're not familiar with HTML, just copy exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm just creating a small HTML document with a header title, so that will look a little bit bigger in the font. And when you're done, just save it, as we've learned using the Ctrl X and yes. Now if I go back to the web browser on my Windows machine and I refresh the page, I'll see the text that I just wrote. So I've changed the default Apache web page to the text that I just wrote. Perfect. The last thing I want to do is I want to change the permissions on that file. I did that so I can allow you to be able to edit it yourself after you finish hacking the machine. Let me show you what I mean. If we do the ls-l command, remember the -l was for long listing to allow us to see the permissions of the file. And look at that. Only root has the read and write permissions. Everybody else can only read the file. In the real world scenario, this is the perfect setup. You don't want anybody to be able to change or write to the public page that you have. But you want everybody to be able to read it because this is your home page. However, when I was creating this target for you, I assumed that the web server administrator has made a misconfiguration error. The web server admin has changed the permissions at one point in time and forgot to change them back to a more secure configuration, which is something that we actually see happen quite often. Usually this happens when the web developers are developing a website in a test environment. They relax the permissions so that they can work on things comfortably, and then they move the server from the test environment to the production environment, where the public now has access to the website, but they forget to change the permissions to a more secure setting. So that was the mindset that I went with. It's a misconfiguration that was forgotten by the web administrators. So I want to give you right access to this file to give you the ability to write to it after you are able to hack the machine. And to do that, remember it was the chmod command. And just to make it easier, I'm going to say give all the read-write permissions on the index.html file. Now if I list the permissions again, I can see that everybody has RW, which is read-write. And with that, I have finished the setup of my target machine. So now the next step is going to be to hack this machine and find your way to the index.html page and leave your mark on it. In the next video, I'm going to show you what you can do using the standard Linux commands that we learned in this course to be able to achieve that. I am going, however, to skip over the part of how you figure out how to hack this machine because I don't want to spoil it for you. To be able to do that, you would have needed to go through the Web Applications Fundamentals course. So, after you've finished setting up, if you're following along with this video, let's move on to the next section.